Everly Nelson had always believed family was a safe word. It meant Sunday dinners and open doors, birthday calls and shared casseroles when life turned sideways. That's what she thought when Callie, her older sister by 6 years, offered her a room after graduation. Denver had been her dream city. She'd earned her master's in interior design from the University of Colorado, but tuition loans and a stalled economy had pushed her right back into the orbit of family. Callie and her husband Boston lived in an immaculate 3-bedroom colonial in Greenwood Village, white shutters, manicured hedges, and a kitchen so polished it looked borrowed from a magazine. When Everly moved in, she was greeted by a hug that smelled like citrus perfume and control. "Family comes first," Callie said, smiling as she handed Everly a spare set of keys. "We take care of our own." Everly meant to stay 6 months at most. She paid $1,200 in rent, just under market, transferring it on the first of every month without fail. She cooked dinner 3 nights a week, kept the house spotless, even looked after their 5-year-old son Liam when Callie's babysitter canceled. Boston was kind but distant, a man perpetually tethered to his phone and client calls, the kind who smiled politely at dinner and disappeared afterward into his home office. For the first few weeks, Everly convinced herself she was lucky. The city lights shimmered through the upstairs window near her desk, and each morning she caught the early bus downtown to her internship at Weston and Dune Interiors, a small but respected firm. Callie bragged about her. "My sister's the talented one, you know," but the compliments came threaded with little barbs. "You just have to learn discipline," Callie would say. "I mean, you're almost 30, it's time you built stability." Everly would nod, fighting back the instinct to remind her that stability came easier to people who married into money. Boston owned a construction company that handled corporate remodels. Together they made a handsome picture: success, family, polished grace. The small imbalances began quietly. Callie started setting new house expectations. Everly could use the washer only on weekends, no guests without notice, no long showers, because our water bill has jumped, and you understand, right? Everly agreed to everything. She wanted peace, wanted to show gratitude. But gratitude in that house began to look like servitude. By late October, the atmosphere had turned brittle. Callie began hosting wine nights for her designer friends, women who wore statement jewelry and spoke like they were on panels. Everly would serve hors d'oeuvres, quietly collecting empty glasses when they left. More than once she overheard her sister's voice cutting through laughter. "She's still figuring things out, poor thing. Graduate debt is brutal." The words stung, but Everly swallowed them. She reminded herself she was building something: her career, her portfolio, her chance. Then came the day everything shifted. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Everly had come home early from the studio to grab her forgotten tablet. The house was quiet, except for faint voices drifting from the kitchen. She froze when she heard her own name. "Now that the deal's coming through," Callie was saying, "we need to start planning how to get her out. Boston, we can't keep letting her stay here. It's dragging energy down." There was the scrape of a chair. Boston's voice followed, hesitant. "She pays rent, Cal. Barely. And honestly, it's not about the money anymore. The business deal's closing. We'll have the nursery to think about." Everly stood in the hallway, the sound of her pulse roaring in her ears. Her hands shook so badly the leather portfolio she held slipped from her fingers, landing on the hardwood with a thud that echoed through the open floor plan. The conversation cut off. Silence. Then Callie's voice, sweet and calm as honey. "Evav, is that you?" Everly stepped into the kitchen doorway, her throat tight. Callie's eyes widened slightly, caught mid-lie, but she recovered in an instant, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. "Oh, you startled me. We were just talking about renovations, planning ahead, that's all." Boston looked down at his watch like he'd rather vanish into its ticking hands. Everly wanted to speak, to demand honesty, but her voice refused to rise. Her sister's calm smile felt rehearsed, the same expression she wore when scolding Liam in front of company. That evening dinner was oddly quiet. Boston complimented the roast. Callie asked about the firm. Everly pretended her world hadn't shifted, but when she went to bed, she lay staring at the ceiling, the words "get her out" looping through her head until dawn. The next morning she paid her rent as usual, electronic transfer, $1,200, and left for work without a word. At Weston and Dune, she sat through client presentations, sketching layouts and nodding through feedback, her stomach in knots. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the humiliating certainty that she'd mistaken conditional tolerance for love. That night, when she returned home, Callie greeted her with a glass of wine. "Rough day? Come sit. I didn't mean for yesterday to sound harsh. I'm just nesting, you know. Family comes first, but you also have to think about what's next." Everly managed a smile, but inside, a quiet flame had started, the kind that burns slow and steady, waiting for air. In the weeks that followed, Everly tried to convince herself she'd misheard, that maybe her sister had meant something else by "get her out." But small changes around the house told the truth more clearly than any confession ever could. The energy shifted. Callie began making polite remarks wrapped in concern. "Don't you think it's time you found your own space, Eve? It's healthy for growth, or you're getting too comfortable here. Independence is good for you." Each phrase carried the weight of a warning disguised as advice. Boston, meanwhile, seemed to vanish more often into silence. He no longer lingered at breakfast. When Everly tried to start a conversation, he'd mumble something about calls or deadlines and disappear upstairs. By Thanksgiving, Callie's politeness had hardened into performance. She announced to their guests that "Everly's helping us so much while she gets on her feet." Then later that night, she whispered over dishes, "I hope you didn't mind me mentioning that. I just don't want people thinking you're freeloading." Freeloading. Freeloading. The words sliced through the air like a blade. Everly almost dropped the glass she was rinsing. "I pay rent every month," she said quietly. Callie smiled too sweetly. "Of course, sweetheart, I know that. I just meant socially. It's good to keep narratives clean. People can twist things." That night, Everly couldn't sleep. The marble walls of that immaculate house had started to feel like glass, thin, transparent, and cold. For the first time, Callie faltered. "Of course family comes first." The words felt poisoned now. Miaset pass. A week later, Everly's proof arrived by accident. She'd sat down at the shared home computer to check a client invoice. Callie's email account was still logged in. Normally Everly would have logged out immediately. But curiosity or maybe survival instinct stopped her. The subject line that caught her attention was impossible to ignore. "Contract finalized, $175,000 commission." Her heart slammed against her ribs as she scrolled. "We need to discuss how to handle the Everly situation diplomatically, now that we're back on solid ground." Callie had written to Boston. "The pregnancy gives us the perfect reason without seeming callous." Everly's hands went cold. There were replies from Boston's work account, short, non-committal, and then Callie again. "She's been useful financially, but it's time to prioritize our own family." Useful, like a broken chair or an old appliance. Everly printed the email before her conscience could stop her. She folded the paper neatly and tucked it between her sketch portfolios, a single piece of truth hidden among blueprints and color swatches. That night, Callie floated through the house, humming to herself, planning nursery colors over dinner. "I think pale sage," she said. "It's elegant, soothing, family-centered." Everly looked up from her plate, calm but shaking inside. "Sage is beautiful," she said. "It's also a healing color." Callie smiled absently, missing the edge in her voice. The following days brought humiliation after humiliation. When friends visited, Callie would make subtle comments. "We've been covering a lot of her expenses while she finds her footing." Or "She's so creative, but organization isn't her strong suit." Each remark chipped away at Everly's credibility. The guests' neighbors, business associates, friends from Callie's design circle, nodded with polite smiles, their eyes flicking toward Everly as if she were a charity case. At night, she'd sit on the edge of her bed, staring at the printed email. Her anger burned low and steady, like a coal under ash. She didn't want revenge yet. She wanted understanding. But understanding wasn't coming. One morning, Callie called up the stairs. "We need to talk about your timeline." Everly stepped into the kitchen, where Callie sat with a clipboard and Boston at her side. "We were thinking 3 weeks," Callie said briskly. "The painters come the 4th week and you'll need time to pack." 3 weeks. Everly's jaw tightened. "I pay rent on time. Every month." Callie sighed. "We've been very fair, Ev. But family space comes first. You of all people should understand that." The phrase landed heavy. Final, smug, unshakable. Family comes first. And with those words the eviction began, not through courts or notices, but through something colder. Polite cruelty. Selective exclusion. The kind that makes you doubt your worth until you vanish quietly. But Everly wasn't vanishing. Not yet. That night she pulled out her phone and photographed every rent transfer, every message, every chore schedule she'd kept. She began saving everything to a private folder labeled receipts. If they wanted to turn her into a lesson, she would write her own. By early spring, Callie had perfected the art of polite cruelty. Every interaction was dipped in honey, but sharpened underneath. Everly's room, once warm with sunlight and scattered sketches, had become a countdown clock. Every time Callie mentioned the nursery, the air in the house tightened another notch. 3 weeks. That was the timeline Callie had given. 3 weeks to find housing in one of Denver's most competitive markets, while balancing a contract worth more than her annual salary. Then came the announcement, "We're hosting the baby shower here. Just family and close friends." Everly froze mid-bite. She hadn't even realized the guest list included her. Callie smiled across the table, her tone sugary smooth. "You'll be here, right? I'd hate for people to think there's tension between us. Family comes first, after all." That phrase again, family comes first, used like a blade hidden inside a lullaby. Meaner on the day of the shower, the house gleamed brighter than a magazine spread. Pink and gold streamers curled down from the chandelier. A white banner above the dining arch read, "New Beginnings." Tables overflowed with cupcakes, candles and Callie's favorite hydrangeas, arranged, ironically, by Everly's own hands that morning. As guests arrived, Everly stayed in the background, serving punch, clearing cups, fetching napkins. Her sister's laughter rang through the air, every giggle rehearsed for effect. Boston hovered near the wall, performing the role of supportive husband, but his eyes carried that same empty distance, a man afraid of disagreement. Then midway through the celebration, Callie clinked her glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The room quieted. Camera phones lifted. Everly froze near the counter, holding a tray of deviled eggs. "I just want to take a moment," Callie began, her voice tremulous in the practiced way of women who know when to cry and when to smile, "to thank my dear sister for being so understanding during this transition. She's been living with us for months, helping out while getting back on her feet, and she's decided to move closer to the city for her career. It's been such a blessing having her here." A round of applause broke out. Everly's stomach dropped. Callie raised her glass higher. "Family comes first, always, and I'm proud that our family can support each other with grace." Grace. The word burned. Everly felt eyes on her neighbors, cousins, aunts, all smiling with polite sympathy, assuming her exit was voluntary. Her cheeks flushed hot. She set down the tray. Her fingers trembled, and then she spoke. "I haven't found a place yet." The words sliced through the laughter like a cold wind. Callie's hand froze mid-toast. "What?" she asked, her voice cracking. Everly straightened her shoulders. "You said I was moving out, but I'm still looking. The housing market's tough, and I haven't found anywhere affordable." A silence spread like spilled wine. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Callie's perfect smile faltered, twitching into something brittle. "Oh well, we didn't want to make your situation sound dire. We're just giving you privacy while you plan your next step." "Privacy?" Everly's voice didn't rise. It sharpened. "You changed the Wi-Fi password, packed my things, and told people I don't pay rent. That's not privacy, Callie. That's eviction." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Boston cleared his throat, color draining from his face. "Maybe we should talk about this later." "No." Everly interrupted. "Steady. We'll talk about it now." Her pulse thundered, but her words stayed precise. "I paid rent every month, $1,200 on time. I cooked, cleaned, helped with Liam. And I overheard you, planning to get me out once your business deal came through. You even wrote about me in your email." Callie's glass slipped slightly in her fingers. "You went through my emails." "No," Everly replied. "Your account was already open. I just read what was in front of me." The room had gone still. A few guests lowered their phones. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Callie's lip trembled, her eyes darting toward Boston for backup. But he stayed rooted, silent. Everly continued, voice calm but lethal. "You said, the pregnancy gives us the perfect reason. The perfect reason to get rid of me. That's not family, Callie. That's convenience." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. For the first time in her life, Everly didn't care if she looked cruel. She didn't care if anyone pitied her. She wanted truth, the kind that stripped the shine from every fake smile in that room. Callie's composure cracked. "This is humiliating," she hissed under her breath. Everly met her gaze. "Steady. Good. Now you know how it feels." Without another word, she set her empty plate on the counter, walked through the crowd of wide eyes, and whispered judgment, and stepped outside into the sunlight. The door closed behind her, and with it, the last piece of her old self. That evening, Callie's friends whispered in private chat groups. "Did you hear what happened?" She exposed her own sister in front of everyone. No, her sister was the one lying. She just stood up for herself. For once the narrative wasn't entirely under Callie's control, but Everly didn't check social media or answer messages. She drove aimlessly until the city lights blurred into streaks. In her chest, shame and pride battled like twin storms. She wasn't sure which one would win yet, but she knew she'd never let Callie decide for her again. By midnight, she parked behind Weston and Dune, reclined the seat of her old Honda, and closed her eyes to the hum of traffic. Tomorrow she'd start packing. Tonight she let the hum of the city drown out the echoes of that living room. The toasts, the lies, and the phrase she'd never forget. She said family comes first, while plotting my eviction. The day after the baby shower, Everly woke to the sound of boxes being dragged across the hallway. When she opened her bedroom door, she found Callie crouched by the closet, folding Everly's clothes into a plastic bin. "Oh," Callie said, with a too bright smile. "You were at work so much, I thought I'd help you get started packing." Everly stared, numb. "You're scratching my boards," she said quietly, pointing to the bent corner of a design presentation she'd spent weeks perfecting. Callie's tone turned syrupy. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You'll be gone soon anyway." That word again, gone. As if she were an object being phased out, not a person with roots and rent receipts. 3 days later, Everly came home to find her access code changed. When she confronted Boston, he muttered something about privacy concerns. Callie stood behind him, hand resting on her small, still flat belly, watching like a queen protecting her throne. "Family comes first," she said softly, as if that explained everything. Mia. By February, Everly's options had run dry. The Denver housing market mocked her. Every application rejected, every room rented before she could blink. She slept 2 nights in her car, the steering wheel her pillow, the dashboard clock her only witness. The temperature dropped to 21 degrees that week. She wore 3 sweaters, a coat, and prayed the engine heat would last until dawn. She showered at the firm before her co-workers arrived, spritzing her hair with dry shampoo in the restroom, pretending the smell of car upholstery on her clothes was just new detergent. At lunch she scrolled rental listings with cracked fingers. The cheapest 1-bedroom she could find required 3 times her income. The second required a 6-month waiting list. Her savings drained fast, first on motels, then on takeout, because keeping food in the car was impossible in the cold. By the second week, her hands shook so badly during client meetings that her boss offered her coffee and whispered, "You all right, Everly?" She smiled faintly. "Just tired." Here on a Thursday morning, exhaustion finally broke her mask. She arrived at Weston and Dune, dropped her sketches onto her desk, and buried her face in her arms. That's when a new hire, Viviana Osborne, noticed. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," Viviana said gently, setting a coffee beside her. Everly hesitated, the words catching like gravel in her throat. "I don't have a place right now." Viviana didn't flinch. "My couch pulls out. It's yours until you get back on your feet." Everly tried to refuse. Pride was a stubborn thing, but Viviana stopped her. "You'd do the same for me. Let me help." And just like that, a sliver of grace entered her life again. Viviana's apartment was small, sunlit, and filled with second-hand furniture that didn't match, but it was warm. On her first night there, Everly slept a full 7 hours for the first time in months. The next morning, she woke early and began her quiet work of rebuilding. She opened her laptop and began saving every payment transfer to Callie. Every email, every text. She photographed her damaged boards and furniture. She organized her files by date and title. At the top of the folder she typed one word: receipts. Every night after work, she added more: snippets of conversations, voice memos, screenshots of Callie's passive-aggressive texts, not to start a war, but to make sure truth couldn't be erased again. Weeks passed, and Everly began to heal. Viviana introduced her to a retired landlord she knew through church, Mrs. Greer, an elderly woman who owned a few small studios downtown. When Everly explained her situation, Mrs. Greer looked her over, eyes soft but steady. "You've been through a storm," she said. "But I like your honesty. I'll waive the deposit, just pay next week's rent." The studio was tiny, barely room for a bed and a small desk, but it had east-facing windows. When the morning light poured in, Everly felt something she hadn't felt in months: ownership. The first night in her new home, she framed the printed email from Callie, the one labeled "Contract Finalized, $175,000 commission," and slid it into a folder marked "Evidence." She whispered, almost to herself, "Family comes first, until the evidence." Nina Ray's. Spring arrived, and with it, irony. Boston's construction firm overextended itself. A project fell through. The business lost its major client, and within months the Nelsons' financial stability cracked. Everly heard through relatives that Callie's dream nursery never got painted. The baby came early. The money dried up. The designer who once bragged about family grace was now whispering to lenders and friends for help. Then one evening, 13 months after the baby shower, Everly's phone rang. The name on the screen made her stomach turn. "Callie." She hesitated, then answered. Her sister's voice trembled. "Eva, things are bad. Boston's business went under. We lost the house. We're in a motel with the kids. Can we stay with you for a month or two, until we get back on our feet?" Everly didn't speak. In the background she could hear a child crying, the shuffle of suitcases, the same kind of desperation that once lived in her own chest. "Blood is thicker than water," Callie said softly. "Family comes first." Everly closed her eyes. That phrase, once a knife, now sounded hollow, like an apology wrapped in manipulation. She said only, "Let me think about it." And she hung up. That night, she called Viviana. "What would you do?" Viviana's voice was calm. "You help, but not at your expense. Protect your peace. That's how you win." Everly nodded slowly. "Then I'll help the right way, Mina Ray." She spent the next 2 days compiling a detailed document titled "Resources for Families Facing Eviction." She listed local housing assistance programs, family shelters, food banks and job aid lines. She printed several copies, stapled them neatly and placed them in an envelope addressed to Callie Nelson. Inside, she added a handwritten note. "This is what I wish someone had given me. You'll find everything you need here, except my home. I hope you rebuild." When she sealed it, she didn't feel anger, just release. For the first time, the phrase "family comes first" no longer defined her. It haunted the past, but she had chosen the future. 2 weeks after Everly mailed the envelope, another knock echoed through her apartment, firm, rapid, familiar. When she opened the door, her parents stood there. Her mother clutched her purse like a prop in a stage play, her father's eyes heavy with forced conviction. "Everly," her mother began softly. "We need to talk about your sister." Everly stepped aside, motioning toward the small table near the window. "Come in." The contrast was sharp. Her modest studio, neat but lived in, against the perfection of the home she'd been exiled from. Her father cleared his throat. "Callie and Boston are in a bad place. They've got the kids, and you've got space here, just for a little while, until they find somewhere stable." Everly stayed standing. "Dad, this place is 400 square feet. Her mother reached for her hand. "We know, but your family. Don't turn your back on them now." For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the city beyond the thin windows. Then Everly opened a drawer and pulled out a neatly stapled packet, the same one she'd sent to Callie. "I already helped," she said, sliding it across the table. "Everything they need is in there. Shelters, housing aid, voucher programs, churches. I did the work for them." Her mother frowned, confusion clouding her face. "This isn't what we meant, no," Everly said gently. "It's not what you expected. You expected me to forget how I slept in my car, how I begged landlords for mercy, while she told people I was lazy. You believed her because she wore confidence like jewelry." Her father opened his mouth, then shut it again. His shoulders sagged. Everly's voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "I paid rent every month. I cooked her meals, watched her child, cleaned her house. Then she packed my things, changed the locks, and told the family I was unstable. I was homeless, Dad, while you were telling everyone I was finding myself. I was freezing in a parking lot off I-25. Her mother's hand trembled over the resource packet. You never told us, would you have believed me? Everly asked quietly. Tears welled in her mother's eyes. We should have. I should have. For a moment the years of sibling hierarchy, the pedestal Callie had lived on, began to wobble. Her parents' silence was the sound of that pedestal cracking. I'm not cruel, Everly said softly, but I won't be used again. You taught us to tell the truth, so I am. Her father nodded, shame flickering across his face. You've become stronger than we were. Nye. A week later came the so-called peace dinner. The Nelson family gathered at their parents' home. A forced truce, arranged under the pretense of healing. Callie arrived in an oversized cardigan, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Boston carried their baby's car seat, head bowed. The table was set with china and awkward tension. Grace was said. Silence followed. Then as plates clinked and small talk stumbled, Callie turned to her mother and said, I just don't understand how she can be so heartless. After all we did for her. Everly looked up slowly. Her mother blinked, confused. Her father adjusted his glasses. Boston paled. Pages 1 and 2 are rent payments, Everly said, transfers receipts, every month. Page 3, text messages from Callie saying how much she appreciated my contributions. Page 4, the email about the $175,000 deal. And page 5, she paused, eyes locking on her sister. Page 5 is the quote where you called me the perfect reasons to make space. Callie's face drained of color. This is ridiculous. You're making me look accurate, Boston interrupted, his voice shaking. She's not lying, Callie. Every bit of it happened. The room fell silent. Everly's mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her father looked between them. Disappointment and disbelief etched deep. Callie tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time the truth wasn't whispered. It sat right there on linen napkins and china plates, undeniable, permanent. Everly rose from her seat. I'm not here for revenge. I just wanted the truth to exist where everyone could see it. You told me family comes first, but that only works when family doesn't weaponize love. She gathered her things, left her copy of the timeline behind, and walked toward the door. Behind her, her father's voice broke softly. Everly, she turned. I'm proud of you, he said. For surviving. She nodded once and left without looking back. Months later, the skyline of Denver shimmered outside her own condo. High windows, clean lines, sunlight across the hardwood. She'd earned every inch of it. Her design firm had just named her project lead for a major downtown contract, one she'd completed while balancing chaos, proof and pain. That evening she hosted her first housewarming. Viviana arrived first with champagne. Then came co-workers, neighbors, friends, her chosen family. The laughter felt different here, honest and alive. When the glasses were raised, Viviana gestured toward Everly. To resilience, she said. To receipts and redemption. The group cheered, and Everly laughed, not bitterly, but freely. Later, as the crowd thinned and the city lights glowed outside her window, Everly stood quietly by her framed certificate. Everly Nelson Design Studio. On the shelf beneath it sat the same folder of documents, rent receipts, screenshots and the printed email, now labeled for the record. She didn't need revenge anymore. The truth had done that for her. As she closed the folder and turned off the lamp, her reflection caught in the glass. Calm, certain, whole. She said family comes first, she murmured with a small smile, while plotting my eviction. But I found the email, and I found myself. The camera would linger on her face, soft against the glow of city lights, not triumphant, not bitter, just finally free.